A very good evening, and thanks for clicking on to the Hogmanay edition of Logan's European Outlook. I would first and foremost like to thank everybody for their support over the last 12 months, and I wish everybody a happy new year. I hope that 2022 brings a lot of joy and happiness to each and every one of you. So I would like to raise a toast, and here's to hopefully a good year ahead. So weather-wise, of course, it is not particularly favourable in terms of a cold weather pattern over the British Isles. In fact, if we look at the current temperatures across Europe, we continue to warm things up as we spread increasingly warm Atlantic air from the subtropics, in fact, extending all the way back to the Azores, the Canary Islands, Madeira. And we're seeing all that warm air now getting transported up through the British Isles, through Spain, France, the Low Countries, into Germany, even into Poland now. We're seeing temperatures way up above the seasonal average. We've seen record-breaking temperatures across parts of the Alps, for example, and even the snowfall that we've seen in recent days over the Moldovan capital of Chisinau. Some tremendous snow scenes coming out of there. That snow is now going to start to melt away as the Atlantic reaches all the way deep into the heart of Eastern Europe. And it's one of those things. Warmest New Year's Day on New Year's Eve day on record for the British Isles and across many parts of Europe, and we'll repeat that for New Year's Day itself as we continue to see this warm weather progressing across the continent here. So what is going on here? At this moment in time, the Arctic Oscillation is moving into a positive phase. So is the North Atlantic Oscillation. There is still plenty of blocking across parts of the Northern Hemisphere. But that being said, if we look at the this is the 2 meter temperature across the Northern Hemisphere at this time. And of course, the deep purples represent temperatures well below minus 20 Celsius. And of course, the British Isles and across the heart of Europe, extending down into southwestern portions of Europe, is seeing much milder than normal conditions. So the warmth over the Atlantic is kind of spreading its way across, progressing across the European continent, all but northern portions of Scandinavia, Finland, and of course into Russia. The cold persists, but it's getting kind of shrunk, and it's getting pushed eastwards here. Now, as we press through the loop here, what is quite interesting is, of course, the core of the coldest air is over two areas at the moment. We've got it over the heart of Greenland, and of course across eastern portions of Siberia at this moment in time, where temperatures into the minus 40s and minus 50s Celsius here. We've got very chilly air across Canada. And what is interesting is, as we press through this loop, and it may not be the chart that you necessarily want to see, I'm afraid, because what appears to happen is that we start to see Europe continuing to lose the very cold air, and in essence it looks, certainly based on this model, and this is the UCMWF, but also the GFS is reiterating the same solution of the cold in essence starting to kind of spread to the other side of the pole, so more over towards the Asia side and also North America. And that, like I say, is not a great sign in terms of Europe here. But as we press through the loop, you could argue that some of the cold, now we've got a little plume of warmer air, if you notice here, that comes into the Arctic region here. But then what essentially looks to happen is that we start to see some of the core of coldest air crossing over top of the pole and in towards the North America side of the Arctic here as we press through the next week or so here. So you can see here, as I press through the loop, what in essence happens is that North America starts to gain colder air. Now, the ECMWF is not showing that just as much, but the GFS is hinting at that of the colder air. But as we press through the loop, the one noteworthy thing to look at is that we don't have particularly cold air over most of Europe here. It's really centered over Scandinavia here. So something worth keeping in mind as we go forward. And it looks as if the NAO and the AO is going to maintain a firm positive signal here. So that is not, like I say, a particularly great, solution and scenario as we go forward. So looking at the current setup here, of course, we've got the area of low pressure with multiple centers over the North Atlantic, extending all the way down into the subtropics. Hence why we've got such warm air, because basically this trough digging further south is allowing warmer air than what you would typically see, even in mild surges, allowing that to get picked up and then, of course, transported north into the British Isles here. Now, as we go forward here, what takes place is essentially that area of low pressure, the complex of lows over the North Atlantic, eventually starts to kind of move eastwards into the British Isles, and it then kind of almost resets the upper air pattern as we go into the new year. So what eventually takes place is we start to ramp up the jet. It becomes stronger. The westerlies, unfortunately, yes, you don't want to necessarily hear that. But one small consolation to all this, folks, is that yes, we may be having an Atlantic-driven weather pattern coming into play here, but what we could start to see is colder air entrained within these areas of low pressure, and therefore there is opportunity for colder spells. There is opportunity for some snow. Granted, it's more high ground feature, and it's also further north. I'm afraid it doesn't look particularly great the further south you go over the UK. But as we press through the period here, this is of course on Monday the 3rd of January, cast your eyes to the north and that area of low pressure, cold area of low pressure with a lot of snow and cold air wrapped around it. What happens is that as we press through the early portion of the week, that feature then starts to dive southwards. Area of low pressure to the west of Ireland here kind of gets deflected and maintained in that kind of more southerly position, if you will. It actually gets deflected to the south. And that area of low pressure to the north opens the door to something a lot colder coming in. So we get fresher, cleaner, Arctic air briefly into the British Isles. The reason why I say briefly is because there's an area of high pressure that moves in to replace those northerly winds, unfortunately. Then we get a spell of probably clearer, frostier weather, cold nights, of course. And then as we press through into the middle and latter half of the week, we've got another area of low pressure. Look at that there, some very deep areas of low pressure developing with this positive AO-NAO pattern development. We've got this 930 millibar low centered literally just off the south coast of Iceland. So what a horrendous weather situation that probably is for Iceland. You know, severe gales, heavy snowfall, blizzard conditions. You know, it's just a shame it wasn't, 500 miles to the southeast, and then, of course, we've got cold air entrainment as well, because we're going to be tapping some of that reservoir of cold over Greenland. That's going to get pulled into the area of low pressure circulation. And, of course, we've got the frontal system associated with that low crossing over the British Isles. Once that system then moves through, we get colder air in the backside, and then we increase the potential for snowfall, not just over high ground, possibly down to lower levels as well here. And that may transfer further south over possibly Ireland, England, and Wales as we press towards the latter half of the week. So this is the ECMWF. The reason why I'm showing that is because it did a great job, or a better job, should I say, at the solution as we came up to the Christmas period. Of course, GFS just always seemed to be that bit too cold. and leaning towards the cold solution more so than, of course, the Icon model or the ECMWF model. So I'm kind of leaning more towards the ECMWF when it comes to the future forecasts. Then, of course, we probably will come back into warmer air once again, because these areas of low pressure do have warmer air associated with them as well. So it's going to be probably quite an up and down type of temperature profile as we go through the upcoming 7 to 10 day period here across the UK. But you notice here these areas of low pressure fairly deep, but also with cold air in place. And speaking of cold air, let's have a look at the 850 millibar temperatures, and we can see the idea at 5,000 feet. Of course, we've got the initial surge of warm air coming up into the British Isles. Area of low pressure to the west comes in, replaces that with less mild air, and then, of course, as we go through the course of Monday and into Tuesday, there's that area of low pressure drops southwards, opens the door to much colder air coming in. So a brief discharge of Arctic air coming down through the British Isles, and that should be a good, return to something a little bit more normal for the time of year, of course. And then as we press through the loop, we've got colder air coming in. Now, I've just managed to skip far too far ahead, unfortunately. But let's go back to the period that I was looking at. So this is Tuesday, 4th of January. Discharge of Arctic air from the north. Area of low pressure then moves up towards Iceland, as you can see there. And then once the frontal system moves through, it contains quite cold air, very cold polar maritime air that has the ability of producing snowfall, and not just to high ground but also to lower levels as well. Then we get a little bit more milder air coming back into the play once again here. So of course, firm zonal Atlantic driven weather pattern on the cards. The saving grace, I believe, is the fact that we've got cold air going to be mixed in with these circulations here, so that increases our possibility of snowfall here. And speaking of snowfall, let's have a look at the snow prospects. Now, of course, over the next 48 hours, the mild Atlantic air continues to eat away at that snow cover across eastern portions of Europe, almost getting bare ground even in towards Russia, as you can see here. But then as we press through the first full week of January, what we start to see is, as we start to see the snow cover continuing to get eaten away over Eastern Europe, we're starting to see the return of snow over the British Isles, which is good to see. Initially over high ground, but then as we press towards the middle and latter half of next week, that cold frontal system pushes through, and then we increase the snow fairly substantially, if you notice here on the CMWF, and that is a pretty decent snow cover, especially over the Scottish mountains here. We could see some very significant snowfall through the period between, I would say, Wednesday and Friday of next week here, and then it kind of shrinks slightly somewhat here. So colder, more unsettled, will be coming back into play next week, and of course we'll fine up in the details as we press into the new working week here. So hope you have a wonderful evening. Please stay safe if you're out and about, and all the best for 2022. Hopefully I'll have a video tomorrow. If I don't, I'll be back again on Monday with more. Happy New Year.